Ready? Hey, can everybody hear me? Okay. Now, what we're going to talk about today, mine's going to be fairly quick and simple, but I hope to get my idea across that I researched while doing this paper. After this, if you want to, we can go outside of the library here, and after this is done, and we can practice on a crosswalk out here. And it's pretty amazing how similar it is to Pompeii. I'm going to tell you today how I got around to talking about crosswalks and, my reasoning, and then maybe some problems with my, maybe some alternative ideas about my argument here. Okay? So, further ado, I'm talking about foot traffic and crosswalks in Pompeii. This is basically what a crosswalk looks like, which I know you can't really see from the glare, but basically you can see that the streets in Pompeii are kind of, maybe about 10 inches deep, and that crosswalks were larger stones that rose so people would not, they could walk across the street without having to get down in this area, which would have been filled with water from rains, horse-drawn carriages, there would be, waste here, so it's not a very nice place to be. So that's the reason why crosswalks exist. But I'm going to argue that that is not why crosswalks exist. In some places in Pompeii, it is because of another reason. But let me tell you how I got to this point. All right, so basically I was supposed to do research on traffic in Pompeii, which is another small subject. But there is a couple of books written about traffic in Pompeii. And I was kind of like, well, I just don't want to read a book and kind of just regurgitate some facts from this book on my paper. And I was like, maybe these crosswalks seem kind of interesting. I was bored. I was looking at Google Maps. I was like, these crosswalks don't make sense at all. So maybe I can use Google Maps to try to maybe come to a different conclusion. But first, we need to understand the idea of Dignitas, which would be our meaning of dignity in today's terms. And it is actually written about by Cicero. He says, the truth is a man's dignity, which is dignitas, may be enhanced by the house he lives in, but not wholly secured by it. The owner should bring honor to his house, not the house to its owner. And as in everything else, a man must have regard not for himself alone, but for others also. So in the home of a distinguished man, in which numerous guests must be entertained and crowds of every sort of people received, care must be taken to have it spacious. But if it is not frequented by visitors, if it has an air of lonesomeness, a spacious palace often becomes a discredit to its owner. All right, so according to Cicero, if you don't have people coming to your house, or you don't even have people passing your house, or seeing your house, then that might be not, that means you don't have much dignity. Okay? This is what a basic Roman house in Pompeii would look like. You're going to have the entrance. Fronts of houses usually would have for this house, two shops on the front that are owned most likely by the homeowner. And you can look from the street straight through the house to the back where there'll be some sort of garden, but there's also going to be an atrium area here. So almost every house has this basic design where you can walk by and you can see from the front to the back, atrium, garden, and two business. So I was looking, and I was like, with this idea of dignity that Dr. Lowe has talked about, and how you have your entourage as a Roman rich Roman, you have your entourage that you walk around with, and you want people to see that you have an entourage and that you have money, and this leads to you having more dignity. And I realized, and I was like, when it comes to the placement of crosswalks, and you're going to have to trust me here, when it comes to the placement of crosswalks, they don't make sense. They seem, instead of being useful for people, they seem to possibly maneuver foot traffic in the way they want to force you to walk in front of their houses. Okay? But this is the first one I looked at. This is the House of the Golden Cupid right here. And this is one of the gates that you enter into Pompeii. Also on the corner right here is one of the many fountains that would be located throughout Pompeii that would give you access to water. So if you're coming in from the outskirts of Pompeii and coming down the street to this fountain, you're gonna be forced to walk in front of this guy's house, some way or another. If you go down and you pass his house on this side, you're gonna have to go all the way down here to find another crosswalk to come all the way back up to the fountain. If you're coming from this way, you're gonna have to cross down here, come all the way up here, cross back up here, and come back down to get to the fountain. So it appears that possibly the crosswalk put in front of the house here, the Golden Cupid, of the Golden Cupid, intentionally forces people to come up, walk by his house, so you can look through the atrium and then into his garden and see how beautiful his house is, see all the people hanging out on the inside, and showing off his nice house. Okay? And he probably put this fountain on here for a reason. So, one example. There's about 50 examples I'm doing for today. All right? This is another example. You have, this is an unknown house. This is a long street. As you see, there are crosswalks here to help you go down the road. But if you ever want to cross the road, crosswalks are never where they should be. You would think they would be on the intersections like we do today, but they're not. They're going to be in front of houses to force you to walk in front of a house. So this would have probably been a pretty nice house at the time. You got your atrium, your two businesses, garden in the back. So if you're walking on this side or this side, to get to the other side, if you don't want to squash through water and sewage, you got to walk down, cross, down, bottleneck area. So you're forced to see this homeowner's lifestyle. Okay? He is Dignitas. Same, pretty similar over here as well. One of the last houses we'll look at. House of the Tragic Poet, one of the more impressive houses. You would think there would be, which I had to narrow it down for scale, but the only crosswalk in this whole street, I believe you can go like the whole time. The only way you can get from here to here is right in front of this guy's house. And it's actually perfect. You can just look straight through and it's pretty impressive. Okay? So maybe the wealthy in Pompeii were trying to influence foot traffic, much like the wealthy do today. You live in a nice neighborhood, you don't want people, there's certain ways to get people not to come to your neighborhood. There's certain ways to get people to your neighborhood. All right, here's one more example. You can't really see it because the stones have been kind of pulled up, but there's a crosswalk right here. And this is one of the more impressive houses. This is right around the Stavian baths. So this would have been a very public place, meaning everybody would come here every day to wash. One of the few places you can cross the street are right here in front of the Casa di Panza. And this guy would have been the owner of the Gladiators in Pompeii. So pretty wealthy guy, wants to show off his house in the middle of town. You're forced to look down into his house and his massive garden and things like that. Now, but if you look at public spaces, it's changed. If you look at places that aren't in front of people's houses, crosswalks kind of turn into more like we know crosswalks today, at intersections, or useful. It becomes more useful. Like around the Stavian baths, besides the one crosswalk that goes in front of the guy's house, all the other crosswalks are, which on the Google Street Level you can see better, all the other crosswalks are at intersections. So like we see today in Florence, most crosswalks are at intersections. In the public spots of Pompeii, crosswalks are at intersections. The more places where they want to force you to go to their house or at least see their house, they're in front of the house. Okay? But I'm not going to say that this is all speculation. There is not a book written on crosswalks. I tried. There was a book released like a year ago. There's not a section on crosswalks. You type in Pompeii crosswalks, usually you just get pictures and nothing about it. There's a lot of speculation in this, but that's sometimes archaeology, that's kind of what you got to do. You got to think maybe what the reasoning behind this, even though there's really no written down evidence, at least by other historians either. So other reasons besides the what I argued in my paper, that it was for the dignity, businesses, if rich, if wealthy politicians or wealthy owners of these houses, their businesses were connected to those houses, so they might have had influence on where the crosswalks are put. So it forced people to cross in front of your businesses, to use your businesses. Convenience. These wealthy people with these wealthy houses, they, maybe they just wanted to have a crosswalk outside their front door, so they wouldn't have to walk down to the end or cross. So maybe it's just convenience. But it also requires closer examination. I got a lot of this on Google Street View, which is from 2009, so not great. And also just from Google Maps, which I have a lot more pictures than that. But it might require looking at, crosswalks closer, was there some crosswalks that used to be here and maybe were moved, and you could see where maybe there was a crosswalk here at one time in front of this house, maybe they fell out of favor of politics or they got their crosswalk moved, or stuff like that. So you never know. So basically that's what I argued. I argued that crosswalks outside of public areas are intentionally put there to increase your dignity. So anybody have any questions?
How does it compare to Rome, like the crosswalks in Rome?
Yeah, that intends to do that here, so you just have to restart the system after about 10 minutes.
Okay.
It's a glitch in that system.
Okay. Okay. What was the question?
How did these crosswalks compare to other comparable cities like Rome?
Well, the
at that
one
time?
thing is we don't really know, because Pompeii is unique, that it is perfectly preserved from that time period. So the crosswalks that would have been there from Rome are long gone.
Okay.
So we can't really see them. Now we do have, there are some Roman traffic laws that existed in Rome, and they sometimes kind of suggest that rich people, there were some that seemed like they wanted them to buy the house, some that they didn't want to buy the house. So we don't know, but there is no, Pompeii is the reason why it's so unique, is because it's the only one where you can, it's frozen in time.
Okay, there's no satellite stuff that you can see from outer space?
Not that I
you
know.
can't
That's
see?
you're gonna be
Okay.
able to see.
And then
across.
are they different stones? I mean, is there some special zoning law? Are they all consistently the same size, or?
I think they're pretty close to the same. They gotta be pretty big and about, they gotta be about 10 inches tall. Okay.
I wonder if it might be a way of saying, we're gonna do something cool for the city, but it also just happens to pass in front of my house, reminding everyone who did it. Maybe a way to look what I did without being in your face with what I did.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because these same people who would own these houses would be the ones that would be building a lot of the major buildings that are public buildings. The guy with the big, massive gladiator house, he's the guy who's putting on the gladiator fights. So, he's a pretty popular guy, so he probably wants people to come see him. So, or at least see
You
inside.
can say, well, I did something good for the city, but it also happens to show what a great house I'm at.
Because at this time, which I don't know if I said it, having a big entourage means you are just bigger and better than the other guys. So if you had 20 guys hanging out in your house and you're just sitting around drinking and eating, people look in there and they're like, oh wow, this guy, he's pretty cool. Or he's on top of things. And then, but if some others maybe not. So.
What is the conclusion of the mode of transportation at that time? I mean, could it have just been kind of like a step stool to keep the wealthy from getting dirty, to get into like a carriage or something of that nature?
Maybe. See, convenience was one of those options that I said was on there.
So what was the mode of transportation at that time?
Mode of transportation would have been by feet. Most people would have walked. I'd be correct on that. But I mean, there would have been chariots. Maybe not necessarily in the way we think of them. Most traffic in Pompeii on the streets would have been carts carrying goods in and out of the city.
So the ruts on the side?
There,
That's for the wheels?
yes, which I wish it wouldn't have shut down. Actually, how do we turn this back on? I got the picture of the ruts and stuff so you can see. Do you know how we turn this back on?
Yeah, did they? Yeah.
But yes, I'm gonna pull up a picture here and you're gonna see some ruts. Now, I don't know, you know, some people say that the ruts are like in the stone because so many carts pass through, but I just feel like they might have been intentionally carved to help wheels get into ruts so they can get past those stones nice and easy.
What purpose would it even cost?
I forgot to mention our-
If you were trying to leverage it to get.
I would say one thing is politics. You would have had people voted in Rome, so if you had a lot of dignitas, then people would have voted for you and put you into power. And a lot of it's just the ego thing, because they would usually carry their entourage to political meetings, so they would roll up in their meetings with their entourage as well to kind of show their political clout. Any other questions before I show that picture? Alright. There we go. All right, let's look at, I think the first picture is the only one that you can really see, which, if we can turn off those front lights, maybe,
Yeah, we can do that, it's just gonna be difficult to see the speakers.
okay,
We can do that, but we can try.
which I know, I was, just for this picture, that's fine. You can see here that going through here, there are ruts of where the wagons would have gone in between the crosswalks. That kind of shows you how big the crosswalks were. They were pretty massive stones. So you would have, in most streets would have been, they're one-way streets. There's not enough room for two carts to go here. So, you know, there's like conflicting information on how traffic would have been, wheeled traffic would have been done. It's either they're all one way, or there might have been people at each end of the street that would, like, you know, call from the stop and let one people come this way and another, you know, so we don't really know.
Do you know what kind of stones those are?
I do not. Dr. Lowe, do you know what stones those are?
It varies. Most of it's local stone. Yeah.
Just from the local, whichever stone, I don't know what stone is located close to Pompeii, but that would be a stone.
Some of the limestone, mainly.
Limestone? Okay. All right. All right, here we go.
This is extraordinary trivia. What's the standard axle width that makes it possible for them to lay these?
I can't remember the dimensions, but it's the same dimension as was used for steam trains in England, and in turn for the
Standard gauge.
Saturn V rocket launchers, because they're all built to the same gauge. You thought Saturn V was designed because of like aerodynamics and rocket fuel? No, because of chariot size.
But I imagine they were all close to the same, because they would have had to.
That's what I was going to say.
I feel like there was a standard of some. There was a standard of some sort that existed where, you know, because I'm sure it would have been very similar to this in Rome and any other Roman city where they were going to have to go through crosswalks and things like that.
I can't imagine Romans just doing stuff willy-nilly because it looked good. They had to have some kind of standard.
So, well, thank you all for listening. Oh,
I've got a question for you. Well, more a comment. It's
Okay.
interesting to see your picture of the lower quality houses by the baths, and you've got the crosswalks on the street corners. I wonder whether that's a neighbourhood where there's no political bigwig to influence placing, so the city places the sidewalks. And the examples you're showing us is where there's a bigwig who can distort the neighbourhood to meet his agenda independently of what the city.
because I'd say that's the biggest house in Pompeii. That one out there by the baths. Because it was pretty close. So, you know, maybe.
Maybe if you have enough money, you can get a crosswalk put wherever you like.
And
Hey,
who paid
like
for
just
the
hey,
crosswalk?
just like today, you know, get a light pole somewhere. Just need a light for your street, you know.
You know the next thing you should do,
Okay.
because some of the houses have benches in front of them. So even if you're just walking past, you are encouraged on a hot day
Oh.
I'm sweating, I'm going to sit down, and they place the benches in front of these wealthy houses. So perhaps they're doing the same thing with that as well.
All right. Well, thank y'all for listening to me. It's a lot of speculation because there isn't much to go on, but we'll see. So,
Thank you.
thank you.